Hi, Aladár. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for being invited.
Absolutely. I always start with this question. How do we know each other?
It's been a couple of years now, and I remember still vividly a viral post about the importance of mental health. And that was the initial touch point. And it came so high up in my feed with so many reactions that I could not overlook it. So I thought I need to talk to this lady because she knows something about the mind that I clearly don't do. And working on a company called Mindset Technologies, that came in quite handy. Interesting start to a long-winded partnership now, I would say.
I remember getting your message, and you sent me a very kind, very thoughtful note, and you described mindset, which was the real sort of the focus of your energy at the time, that you were looking at measuring cognitive load using really cutting-edge technology, both in the hardware and then in the AI, to analyze the eye motions that the hardware captured. And then to be able to take that information and use it to help coach people toward better human performance. Those are all things that I'm interested in. I'm interested in how technology can advance our well-being. I'm interested in how technology can help us understand ourselves better, our environment, our relationships. I was really struck when we first started talking about your passion for human thriving. And when I think about you, the things I think about are your care for others and just how committed you are to using technology positively. I'm curious, how did you first get excited about tech?
That's a good question, and probably the answer is in asking how did I get disgruntled with big corporate, and that was studying at a business university and all my colleagues going off big consulting firms or investment banks, and me being a little bit part of that ecosystem as well during various internships, and then finally I thought. I want to be sneaky and smart and, get a good salary, but not work quite as hard, but still get the same exposure and the same learning. I thought being a strategic assistant to boards makes a lot of sense. So I became CFO assistant and then later, joining various roles in big corporates where I was working very closely with the management. I think I got those kind of learnings, but I also saw the parts of the corporations that I didn't like, which was, relatively slowly moving project, not that much in-house innovation, a bit of a lack of entrepreneurial spirit, at least for my taste, because, I would, if I could, I would turn all of my ideas into businesses. Probably most of them would terribly fail, but I just have that kind of spirit. Basically, then leaving corporate and going into the entrepreneurship, and these days pretty much everything is about technology, is probably the right answer here. So it's more like seeing what can be done in an entrepreneurial environment to solve problems and naturally using technology. I think it just fits my nature.
So many things that you said in there strike me as just such Aladár statements. Only you would get into entrepreneurship thinking, maybe I won't work as hard. You probably work harder than anyone that I know. You have an appreciation for when the situations you're in or the environments aren't places that were built for your spirit or built for you to thrive. You get out of them, stepping out into true startup life. And that is very much your spirit. It's innovative. It's scrappy. It's resourceful. It's creative. You're always iterating. You are always building new relationships. One of the things that I have most appreciated about our friendship over the years is that I feel sometimes that I have made a connection for you, but you have already responded before I've even actually hit send. I will think to introduce you to someone, and then I swear your note in response comes before I've even sent the first message. I just have always been really struck by you have a ton of energy for relationships, for building, for creating. I'm really curious, when did that start in your life? Because I can't imagine that that's a recent development.
Yeah, well, thanks for all the compliments. I'm getting a bit overwhelmed by them today. And I'll tell you a story that I think we never talked about. And this is truly the origin of where I learned to appreciate that relationships matter more than anywhere else. And it already started in school where, I come from a small town and it was not easy to get an internship. And most of us, we were like, we're, I don't know, 14, 15, 16. No one was making money, obviously, because we were students. But the few of us who made money during the summertime, they made money because their parents got them an internship. So my parents were not that well connected in town. We were kind of new there. We also, we didn't know the mayor or those kind of people who can put you somewhere in an office and feel important by making a couple €100. So I thought, well, if you know the right people, they will help you to do the right things. I think it's really true in a business kind of way. There is a certain amount of nepotism there, but there's also a certain amount of true trust that leads to true growth. So just because you know someone and you get them a job, it doesn't mean that they're the worst candidate because it was an introduced relationship. It often can be the better candidate because they were introduced for a good reason. And the second point of it is actually that, people like you and I, we love to connect. We love to create value. We love to explore the world also through relationships and the networking. And oftentimes these introductions don't lead to immediate business value, but they often lead to learning that then helps you in your personal life. And that's maybe the much more fun and the much more rewarding part of it.
I appreciate that because for me, business relationships are personal. Like business is personal. And when we have a business relationship, what makes it a business relationship is that there's a commercial angle to it. Relationships that are not authentic, that aren't genuine, that aren't peer-to-peer in a business setting, they're not meaningful, because they're superficial. So there has to be some level at which you connect with another person around your shared humanity. And then in a business context, you're able to have commercial conversations. And commercial conversations can be about pricing. They can be about terms and conditions. They can be about deliverables. To be able to have a conversation that is based in something transactional while not losing the relational element, to me, is the real secret to business relationship. If you are buddy-buddy with people, but you can't have a hard conversation, it's not a very good business relationship. And at the same time, in your business relationships, if they're purely transactional and there isn't a human element, there isn't a shared sense of values or mission or purpose or belief, then they're not particularly authentic or genuine. And I think it's important that we balance between being human with one another and also recognizing that if we're in a commercial relationship, there's something transactional there. And the word transactional gets such a bad rep in our culture. I've heard people say, I hate that. It's so transactional. It's like, well, the foundation of all of human interaction is social exchange, which is fundamentally transactional. I do this, you do that, whether you're inspired or compelled. When we lean too far to an extreme, when our business relationships are entirely transactional, it's entirely commercial, there's no human element, those are not relationships that last, they're not sticky. And on the other side, when we have relationships that keep us from having those hard conversations, from saying what we really think and what's meaningful and on our mind, that doesn't yield the right answer either. And so I find that building relationships in business contexts are really fulfilling because you're being asked to live in the tension of those two spaces between the relating, the humanity, the authenticity, the genuineness of the relationship, and never letting that go. And at the same time, being able to have commercial, transactional, sometimes tough conversations. And I'm curious how building relationships in a business context as an entrepreneur and a member of the C-suite in two different companies.
I would underline everything that you said, and I would rephrase it and maybe build on that in a way that it's not just that it's not enough to be transactional or it's not enough to be personal and it cannot transcend further. Both kind of relationships, they work in their own way. And then you could say with your friends, you can be yourself and you have great friendships. With your business partners, you can make great business as long as that lasts. However, and it's not for everyone, but if you do manage and if both sides want to become friends beyond business or do business with friends, there is a lot more potential to synergize together. And the way you can look at it is not just from a business perspective, but also from a personal growth perspective. So one question that I learned to ask from actually someone who is in a small town next to my small town, his name is Herman Gams. And Herman is a visionary. He said that Silicon Valley can be everywhere, but that in Europe, Silicon Valley should look more like Dreamicon Valley, he calls it. And he founded the Dream Academia. And a question that I learned to ask from him is, what's your dream? And, it might sound a bit fluffy and it might sound a bit like, is this guy even serious? But I like to start my conversations with that question these days, even in business settings. And, oftentimes people are surprised. And oftentimes if they do want to answer, you get conversations that go much deeper. They're much more meaningful. And ultimately, into a direction that are good for both. The way I like to operate, and maybe that's how you saw, me trying to respond quickly and being helpful at the intersection of introductions, is I like to operate kind of as a personal concierge. And I believe that each of us, especially when we are in business settings, we are sort of a one-man platform where we know what is this person looking for, what is the other person looking for, and where is the overlap between that. And if you are a good concierge, you can bring supply and demand together. And if you know what the dream of people is, you get them closer to something that they want, and you can make things happen that they would never have been able to do before. And I have a very beautiful example that is really, I think, a dream that has come true. I have a mentee in a student program that was launched by an Austrian university, and his name is Thomas Wimmer. And during my time at the WEF in Davos, I've met Christina Korb, who used to have a career in music, and then she did various different gala events, and with one of those events, an astronaut, Buzz Aldrin, one of, I think, the last person alive who has been on the moon, somehow discovered her, and she became a representative not just for musicians, but she's been a musician herself, and then she went into representing musicians, but she started to represent astronauts, and she calls herself the astronaut wrangler. And now she does experiences, I would call it experience design between Earth and space, and how space technology can help planetary well-being, and connect basically people at the intersection of science, space, investment, and having a very interesting role in that domain. And I knew these two people, and Thomas is studying medicine, but I asked him, why are you studying medicine, Thomas? What's your dream? And he said, well, this is the closest thing that will get me to space, because, Austria is not exactly known for, other than Franz Schieber, being a country that sends hundreds of astronauts into space. And then he said, well, if I cannot become an astronaut, maybe I can become a doctor for astronauts, like become an assessor, become a physician, becoming someone who can diagnose certain things. And I said, well, why don't you go for the real thing and talk to Christina? And it turns out that these two people, got along very well. Christina invited Thomas to Space Week in London. And now he has suddenly built, I believe, a network that's much better and closer to space than most people in Austria have. This is how close and how meaningful and how beautifully you can create value if you ask, what's your dream and where does your journey is really supposed to go?
That's a fantastic question. What is your dream? I love dreaming. I love inspiring people to dream. I love to dream myself. And when you were talking, I was thinking about a reminder of why we're friends. I think a commonality I've always seen between us is that we are always on the lookout for people that we can connect with one another, because if only they knew each other, they would spark something that would help make the world better. How do we take advantage of technology to facilitate more human interaction? How do you see yourself engaging in these spaces, creating these spaces?
Absolutely. Yeah. You said something about we can't create all the change alone, and I fully agree. And if I take that to the extreme, I would say if everyone knew everyone's dreams, it would be very easy to regroup and, you say, oh, there is someone in Australia who has already thought about it. Why don't you give him a call? And it would be kind of, LinkedIn is a network intermediary, and imagine we could do it even more efficiently. And I'm sure that in the future there will be ways to do that. And I know someone who's actually working on it. His name is Jazz Razul, and someone we could maybe have a trilateral call one day. But he's working on a social network that is connecting people not just based on relevance, but based on resonance. Because relevance is kind of a one-sided or one-dimensional aspect where you say, okay, he's working on this problem, you're also working on this problem, you guys have a chat. What you do very well, I think, or I have experienced, I don't just think it, is that you have this resonance element in there. For example, when you recently connected me to Dylan Denso, it was like, why haven't I met this person 20 years ago? And this resonance where we have so many shared values, shared viewpoints, shared many other things that just, there was no immediate business value from talking to Dylan, but he's still like, he comes up in my feed, and I saw the other day he got a new job. I was genuinely happy that he got that job. And normally to be very frank, normally I'm not. I get a lot of these business updates where people, another business update in my feed about a relatively meaningless job of a person who, I might have not spoken to in a long time, or about where I would even think, well, it's good that this person has a new job, but actually I think they should be doing something else. And with Dylan, it was the opposite. I was like, oh, I knew he was looking for a job. I was so happy he got it, and just because I like him. And this is this resonance-based networking. And I think there will be ways where platforms and networks and also people get a better feel for what, and maybe it goes back to the dream, or it goes back to not just the dream, but how a people is, to the person's being. What are we supposed to do? What do we care about? And how do we truly create the best selves? And by creating our best selves, we also create a better world together. So I believe that's this, resonance versus relevance element that Jazz loves to stress a lot, and I fully agree with. And the other part about technology is that it's easy to get dragged down when times are hard, and business models are geared towards, let's say, frequent presence based on commercial interests. What does that mean? Newspapers want to make money, obviously. The subscription business has had a much harder time because young people, they don't just have a newspaper subscription where you pay, a couple $100 per year so that you automatically get a newspaper no matter if you read it or not. But these days, as many people know, the more ads they can serve us, the more cents per click they will get. So that means that the messages need to be more and more outrageous. And if the messages in the newspapers would be, oh, everything is okay, don't bother reading us, they would go out of business very quickly. So they have to write about, how everything is terrible, and if you don't read it, you might be in danger yourself. And unfortunately, it's maybe oversimplifying this very much, but this is a little bit how I perceive the world of media. Now, in a media environment like that, it doesn't just stay in the realm of newspapers, but it also transcends into the world of social networks, which are kind of a social network plus a media company in one. And that's how negativity can transcend easily into social networks. Now, what I have done, and this is just being me trying to trick the system a bit to my own advantage. The way I created my LinkedIn feed and my other social media feeds is I very, very meticulously curate, and I try to bring in the right people. I try to follow the relevant organizations, and I follow the things that I think are meaningful, that are useful, that somehow create value. And if I want to read bad news, I buy a newspaper. So basically, this comes back to how can we create the world that we would dream about with the people we want to collaborate with, and then bring this positive momentum rather than complaining about everything that's not working, because that's easy.
There's a lot to unpack there. And as you were talking, one of the things that I was thinking about is how business models directly affect behavior at scale. You are working on two companies that are heavily reliant on data, both Mindset and Allindex. And I'm curious how you think about data privacy as well as data sovereignty, how you think about people having control over their data, ownership of their data, and then also, though, being able to give consent for that data to be used for their benefit.
Yeah, and probably the best person to ask is you, because you've been working on blockchain related topics in that space. And ultimately, I think where we are similar is that we like freedom, we like choice, we like transparency, we like open source models, and we like basically modalities in which people kind of thrive on the use of data rather than get exploited it's not always exploitation, but maybe sometimes people would be surprised. Oh, if I had known that all my data would have been used in that way, I might still have given my consent, but maybe I would have done it differently, or I would have done other things, or have been more cautious, etc. So yeah, that's also something that you probably have a lot to say about, and I would love to yeah, maybe have a just 2 sentence update on all the new things that you've learned there in the latest developments, because at the moment it's relatively easy for us at Mindset Technologies and Allindex. Ultimately, we're in the B2B space. We provide software to business customers who basically can make more informed choices. So basically, it's all the data that they give to us, they are in full control. And the reason they give the data to us is because they want to be able to make choices that they can use to enhance their business actions. And in the context of Allindex, it's basically getting an allocation that truly matches your values, whether it's thematic investing or faith-based investing or AI-enabled research, boosted investing, whatever kind of angle you want to take. You could also, some people called it a very smart Excel sheet. And maybe that's oversimplifying, but in essence, it's about very smart filtering and being able to make decisions, or at least the research for the decisions, much quicker than if you send it to a third party service provider that is not so specialized, or that doesn't understand you very well, or that is not as technology enabled as we are. And in the context of Mindset Technologies, it's interesting in terms of getting an insight that previously literally hasn't been there, because it was not so much the technology that was lacking, but it was more the neuroscientific know-how that hasn't been coupled with the technology. And that's where I'm always very impressed with my co-founder, Christian, who, has basically spent his life on bringing neuroscience into the equation of decision making and saying, okay, what does it really mean to be in a high pressure situation, and how does your physiology change, or how can you perceive your physiology changing? And sometimes people are not that self-aware that, when you're under high stress situation, your focus narrows. And when you're in a, let's call it either racing car or fighter jet, or, these kind of environments, then there are certain things that you should do under pressure, certain things that you shouldn't do under pressure. And it's not enough to know it in hindsight. There are certain protocols, but I give you a simple one. For example, if you're in an overtaking situation, being a race car driver that is being chased, it's enough if you only look in the rear view mirror one time. And then you realize, okay, someone is following me. And now I focus 100% of my attention, to get ahead and to do the right things. Whereas the, let's say, more nervous ones, they would constantly look in the rear view mirror and say, oh my God, I hope he will not catch me in the next 5 seconds. And that's a relatively simple example, but it's a behavior where knowing the right thing and realizing a behavioral algorithm is not that easy, but it can be easily displayed and easily improved and easily also made aware using technology. Because you're even in a simulator environment, your instructor, who will not always be next to you, he will not always know 100% what you do, because he doesn't have this first person perspective. And now, now that we have cameras with very low latency, with very high resolution, and algorithms that we can build into, software-based analytic solutions that you can develop or deliver in real time. With all these things, we can basically make people more aware. So for me, to bring it to a bit higher level, Allindex for me was about making people more conscious in their decisions, and mindset technologies is about making people more aware.
So it's a very insightful reflection that you've had on how understanding the way our brains work, how we take in information, how we process that information, how we relate to those around us in our environment. There's a real tendency to assume that simply because we have more data, that gives us more control. Not necessarily. What we can do is we can work to know how to make better decisions for ourselves and show up in spaces the way that we want to show up as our best selves.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm thinking, in finance, even big companies are talking about financial literacy, not so much because they want to save the world and always, really educate people, but sometimes from a self-interest point of view, to simply bring more financial products to people who learned about financial products. But in analogy to that, it's interesting, say before data sovereignty, there needs to be something like data literacy. And given that it's such a new topic, maybe it needs to become a subject at school somewhere, because otherwise, how can you even start conversations about it if you don't have the fundamentals?
So, Aladár, I'm going to turn the question on you. What is your dream?
I have a very big dream, and it's called A World in Harmony. And it sounds a bit fluffy, and many people either laugh or at least smile when they hear it. But actually, harmony is something that many people understand intuitively, and that is great, because I think once we lose that, we're in big trouble anyway. But there is also a way to understand it scientifically, and I believe that harnessing harmonic principles at a higher level in a structured way can bring a lot of good to the world. And what do I mean? If you look at musical compositions, if you look at a classical symphony, you will find certain rules and rhythms that you can establish. Okay, either it's the solo player playing or it's the orchestra playing, but they play so that they're not. If they overlap in a actually mathematically, musically structured and harmonious way that sounds good to the ears. It's not just uninformed people sitting down and trying their best at their instrument. So there are certain ways how harmony can be catalyzed in music. There are ways how harmony can be catalyzed in data infrastructure. There are ways how you can look at harmony in mathematics, in physics, in biology, and in human and social relationships. And if you look at those things and you understand, and of course, and this is my current WhatsApp status update, it's peace and harmony starts within yourself. And if you find ways to foster harmony in yourself and to foster harmony at a higher level, I think we can get to a world where, politics, arts, culture, science, technology, and all the other disciplines, they actually collaborate on an inflection point where harmony is not a coincidence, but harmony is something that we all actively work towards. And there is already so much there in nature that we can leverage, that we kind of just have to remember and redirect rather than reinvent.
Who do you most want to be talking to right now?
Alive or dead?
You answer the question how you want to answer the question.
I think there have been lots of great people in the past who have showed the ways, and I love this statement. I don't even know who said it. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants. Probably, in an abstract form, you can literally go into nature and look how it works. There was this documentary where I just saw the trailer a while ago, where a farmer couple was rewilding their farm, and they kind of had this fusion concept of traditional farming coupled with, almost like bringing the wood onto the farm rather than cutting down the wood and enlarging the farm. And they had kind of one of the most successful, but also one of the most beautiful farms. And people from all over the world are coming there. And it's just a great reminder to see what is already there that works and that is, non-intrusive and that is collaborative and that leaves the room for individuals to express it, themselves without harming each other. I think that works in a symphony, that works on a farm with the wood and the environment, that works between children who learn to listen to each other rather than constantly shouting over each other. And, there's so many applications for harmony. You can literally bring this concept into everything you do. So who do I want to talk to about it? I think everyone. Where can we learn it? I think also everyone. So this is another one from Herman, who, came up with a dream academia. He said, in every situation, we are both teacher and students at the same time. And I think it's so true, because going back to harmony as a goal, at least for me personally, when harmony is not present yet, you can always ask why. And you can ask, is this my fault? Is it someone else's fault? Is fault even the right way to look at it? Or is it a transition period where there is something for us to learn that ultimately will lead to an outcome that looks and feels and hopefully is better for those involved?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think Isaac Newton, who, by the way, that's where the statement comes from.
Oh,
If I have seen further, it is because I stood on the shoulders of giants.
okay.
So, unfortunately, I think Sir Isaac is indisposed. But I think that people hearing you talk about the harmonious world, about your passion for evoking awareness, your passion for helping people to think more broadly, think more deeply, be more observant, I think that will resonate with a lot of people. And I'm hoping that some of them will reach out to you, because I have so thoroughly enjoyed all of our conversations. I look forward to more in the future. I'm just really excited to see how what you've already built and the groundwork you've already laid, how that iterates and grows further. Because I think that what we will see in 6 months, to some extent, may not be anything we can imagine right now.
I think the journey is the reward in itself.
I can't think of a better note to end on. The journey is the reward in itself. Aladár, thank you so much.
Likewise. It's a pleasure.
It is, always. I'm glad you're my friend.
Thank you.